You know, when it comes to food in this country, I would never have thought, when you're talking about Donald Trump, that food would become such a cornerstone issue and animate so many voters, but boy has it. And Kyle Diamantis, who is the Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods at HHS, joins us. And it's a real pleasure to meet you, first of all.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
This subject of food, man, I really, like in all of politics, I never would have thought food quality, what's in our food, would ever be a presidential issue. But man, has it been. And it's really animated moms.
It has, and you know, it has its moment, right? So food is sort of having its moment in the media landscape, as you talked about. You know, when I first started, there were people that came up to me and said FDA. They thought the F stood for federal instead of Food and Drug Administration. So I always say we're really grateful to be putting the F back in FDA, having food back in the national spotlight. And to your point, it is having its moment. It's become something that people are really passionate about. And the polling shows that 80-90% of people care about food, care about labeling, care about what we're putting in our bodies, our children's bodies. And this is a bipartisan issue and one that every American should care about.
I think everybody kind of thought about their diet and health, but there's a unique focus on it now. Food dyes, what we're putting on our food. What happened? How is it that we suddenly became so passionate about it when maybe even 20 years ago, it was like, well, that probably is great for you, but we didn't think about it like we do now.
Yeah, look, I think Secretary Kennedy deserves a lot of credit for elevating the food issues, bringing it into the public sphere. To your point, I think moms and dads sort of thought about like, hey, maybe I shouldn't feed my kid this, but it's always been about convenience, right? And you're on the run in the morning. Let me just pop that waffle in there and throw some sugar on it. But Secretary Kennedy and this administration, with President Trump's support and endorsement, have really said, let's step back and take a look about what we're doing to our bodies and what we're doing to our children's bodies. And so there's a lot of work we're doing at FDA and HHS to address these issues. Food dyes is a classic example of that. We also released in January the Dietary Guidelines for Americans.
The food pyramid.
The new food pyramid.
Flipped upside down.
Flipped it upside down, turned it on its head. This is a once every 5 years project. So we're grateful to be able to do it in this administration. It's a joint project with HHS and USDA, and it's really reformed the food system in America, and it ultimately will. You know, this is going to impact things like school meals, SNAP and WIC, federal programs. You might not know, your listeners might not know this. The United States Department of Agriculture, every day, for their nutritional programs, whether it's school lunches, SNAP, WIC, other programs, they send $400 million a day out the door to pay for nutrition in this country. And so if we can meaningfully change that by making those foods they're paying for just a little bit healthier, we can address some of these problems we have as a country when it comes to our chronic disease crisis.
The establishment medical communities like the AMA, generally speaking, have they received the work you guys are trying to do well, or have they been combative? I've read at times they're combative, certainly on things like shots, vaccines, but how about food?
You know, I would say we have a little bit of a white flag area on food. You know, when we announced the new dietary guidelines for Americans, we had the president of the AMA with us at the White House on stage, applauding the release of these dietary guidelines and our focus on eating real food. What we're saying for the first time is that Americans should be focused on eating those foods that we've always eaten, right? Before these ultra processed foods really became into our diet. The average kid nowadays, 70% of their calories comes from eating ultra processed foods. 70%. If you go to most countries in Europe and Asia, it's under 20%.
I hear this all the time. Europe eats differently than we do. I mean, I've been to Europe a couple of times, but not enough to be an expert on this.
Yeah.
That the things they eat just don't look like, don't taste like, don't smell
They're
like.
more passionate about their food. They pay double. They spend double on food than we do in America. And they spend 3 times less on healthcare cost. So there's something to that. You know, they're eating better food, spending less on healthcare. We're paying less for food, spending way more on healthcare. And so, you know, it is a passion there. Obviously, they have different regulatory schemes, but they pay more money for quality foods there. And that's not to say that we can't afford quality foods here in America. In fact, the dietary guidelines for Americans that say eat real food, if you go to a grocery store, you buy a protein, you buy fruits and vegetables, you go home and cook that for your family of 4, it costs less money than going out and eating takeout or going to a restaurant for your same family of 4. So by changing your diet, adopting these dietary guidelines, not only are families across America going to put more money into their pocket through savings, but the healthcare savings that the federal government will realize from reducing those chronic disease rates is in the billions upon billions of dollars.
I don't think anyone's doing it nefariously necessarily, but again, I never really thought about big food. We talk about big pharma or big other things, but food was never something that I thought about.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to make a buck in business, but is it just, what is it? What has caused the food industry to deteriorate for us the way it has?
I really don't think that it was intended for nefarious purposes. In fact, if you go back to sort of the post-World War II baby boom generation, the federal government said to the, big food, if you want to call it that, they said, hey, look, we're moving into the suburbs. We want to stock the pantry. We need these foods for national security. We're entering the Cold War era. And the government said, hey, make these foods that are more shelf stable for us. Make these foods that can last a little longer in the pantry, in the refrigerator. So the food industry answered that call for idealistic purposes. The problem is, if you go back to the 1940s, 50s, 60s, we didn't have the knowledge that we have now about the potential harms that some of these foods have, whether it's from the excess sugar, the excess sodium, the refined carbohydrates, or some of the additives, the stabilizers, emulsifiers, things like that. So we're only now beginning to understand better what it is in these foods that are potentially problematic.
Shelf stability, while it was the goal, did not make us healthier. There were things to make things shelf stable that have been bad for us.
Well, that's right. Their sole intent was to make food last longer in the pantry or the refrigerator, and potentially without understanding the health impacts that might have on us. So that's something this administration is really focused on, is to look at those additives and say, is this something we actually need? Now, there's obviously a balancing act there. The science has to be vigorous. And so we're doing all those processes. But it's look, I want to say that industry on food dyes, for example, has answered the call. They've done that for a number of reasons. One, we've used our powers to compel that, but they're also responsive. And this is what's great about the MAHA movement. They're responsive to the consumer. Consumers talk with their wallets, as you know. Food industry is incredibly responsive to consumer demand. Consumers aren't demanding these products anymore that have, they're glowing pink or glowing green, right? They want a natural alternative, a healthier product. And so industry is both answering our call, but also responding to the demand from consumers to change these products.
I tell you what I have noticed in marketing in just the last few months: protein. Everyone is talking about protein now. Do you think that's driven by this administration?
It's absolutely the result of the new dietary guidelines, which have promoted almost doubling of the amount of protein that the average consumer should consume. Now, I do want to just say the American people should be mindful of how they're getting that protein. If they're just adding protein to a sugar beverage that's got 100 grams of sugar in it, that's not the ideal way to get your protein, right? You want to be eating the chicken, the beef. Absolutely fine to get protein from other sources, a ready-to-made drink, but Americans should be. And I've noticed that boom too. I've walked through Target, and the middle row has 7 different new advertisements for
all
protein
the fast food places now are talking about protein
everywhere. So people should just be mindful that there is some marketing as part of that to capitalize on what the dietary guidelines are promoting, and people should really just make sure they're not getting those from foods that also have a lot of sugars and other things in it too.
I asked Oz about this. The secretary has commented on it on social media, and Oz well explained why. Glyphosate, something that I didn't know anything about, but I've seen a lot of MAHA moms on social media very upset that this is still used and that the president said we still need to use it. The secretary went on social media and said, it is a problem, we should be rid of it, but it would be a terrible detriment to the economy right now, and we really can't just turn it off like a switch. Is that about right?
Yeah, and let me just say, what I would say in response to those MAHA moms and dads who are passionate about this is that the movement is not linear. Successful societal movements in general, go back to the civil rights movement, suffrage, any movement you want to look at, it's never just a vertical linear line. There's going to be troughs where issues happen. This is an issue that I think most of the MAHA movement is upset about. But there will be other ones in the future where we reverse trends and we do things that the MAHA movement will love. So we want them
clearly on the radar.
It's on the radar. The MAHA movement should stick with us on this. We understand the passion there. But just know that this is a long-term trajectory for the MAHA movement. It's something the secretary in the administration are absolutely committed to. This may be viewed as a setback, but the MAHA movement will continue, and we'll continue to accelerate our goals.
Final question. In getting everybody more fit and thin, is it also a requirement that all of you have thinner ties?
Well, you know what? The secretary, actually, this is his personal tie.
Is it really? I was going to say, it
I don't
looks
think
like
you can
him.
actually buy ties.
Really? Where does he get them? I don't even know how you get a tie that
So
small.
he has them custom made. So he buys the skinny tie and then has a tailor make him even skinnier for him.
Does he really? I was gonna, you can't. You
I hope he doesn't mind me saying that.
No, I'm
right?
glad to know it because you can't find
You
those.
can't buy him that skinny.
So that's his. That's a Kennedy tie.
That's a Kennedy tie. I wore it just for today. There we go.
Skinny ties, skinny people. I like it. It all works. Mr. Diamantis, it's a real pleasure to make your acquaintance. I hope you'll come back.
Great to be with you. Love to. Anytime. Thanks. Appreciate it.